So to kick it off, my name is Karina Ross. I'm the Director of Constituent Relations at the Association Graduates for the United States Air Force Academy. And today I have the pleasure of hosting or helping host the Franchise 101 panel with our great team listed here on the side. So now I will go ahead and pass it over to Paul and his team of franchising.
Thanks very much, Karina. Hey, Paul Huzar here, and I've got with me Mike Long as well. We're both West Point grads. I'm a class of 90, Mike's 94. I'm a retired Army officer as well. I'm the CEO of VetCor and Team VetCor. VetCor is a restoration company. We help solve water and mold related challenges in commercial and residential properties. But the thing that makes us unique is we do it by primarily deploying veterans of the U.S. military. Our policy is we employ veterans and those who share similar values. And now we're franchising to primarily veterans and their immediate family members. But we're not here to talk today to talk about VetCor. Happy to follow up with anybody out there if they have interest in that. But we've made this presentation generic about franchising. And so hopefully we can structure this and answer questions and talk about franchising as an opportunity. I'm going to start it off, and I'm going to do a lot of based on what I have found to be important to helping veterans like you and me and other friends in the area transition. So here's the agenda I'm going to cover. And really, hopefully we'll get you narrowed down to franchising specifics. And then we're going to hand it off to a couple of grads from service academies who can really help further refine and discuss franchising as an industry and an opportunity for you. But like any good former military guy, you have to have an agenda. So there it is. But I'll get into the agenda and the meat and potatoes of the presentation now. So let's start out with talking about what do you want to do? That's the typical question you get asked when you're transitioning. And what I encourage you to think about more is what's important to you. And this is really based on experiences that I had personally transitioning, but also having talked to, we're in Tampa, Florida, so I get an opportunity to help counsel and chat with a lot of senior transitioning folks from CENTCOM and SOCOM who are here at MacDill Air Force Base, as well as classmates and friends who transitioned from active duty as well. And so this is what I found is when you talk about what you want to do, when somebody asks you that question, you end up talking about compensation, position, those types of things. But what I found is oftentimes we don't know what we want to do because we've just been going wherever the hell the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines tell us where to go based on our assignment orders and doing whatever they tell us we're supposed to do. And because we appreciate that sense of service and we like being part of the team. So if you think about it, try to answer these questions about what's important to you. And inevitably, I hear things like, well, quality of life, sometimes geography, sometimes the things on the left, but more so, what's the mission and purpose of the organization? We oftentimes find ourselves wanting to find an organization that has similar cultures, norms, and values, similar teammates, similar values, et cetera. And I'll issue a warning. Because what I found after talking to, and I've been retired now for almost 8 years, and I spend a lot of time counseling and helping informally counsel other veterans and transitioning senior military. What I frequently hear is things like, well, I want to make at least what I'm making now as a retiring colonel. And that has a lot to do, in my opinion, about ego. And then what happens is they find an organization that's willing to offer them the compensation or the duty position and title, but they're not happy and they end up leaving within 6 months. Versus if you find some place that offers you all the things on the right-hand side or whatever you determine is important, you end up being happier. When you're happier, you perform better, and then you have the opportunity to raise your level of compensation based on great performance. So just something to think about when you start this conversation. Now, here's what I've found, and particularly as a franchisor, but I think it also helps answer this question of what's important to you. And I call this chart the sweet spot. And so if you can find the intersection of something that you love doing, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at, and you'll never work a day in your life because you grew up, you wake up every morning and you have passion, you have a mission, It's not just a vocation, but it's the culmination of all these things, and it turns into a profession of something that you're willing to give back to your community, help. In our case, in VetCor, what I've done is built this slide out. And let me just expand on it a little bit more, and I think Gilbert and Josh can talk about some of this as well. So, I like fitness, and many of us like fitness, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be a gym owner, because when you talk about what you love doing, you want to make sure as you hit your sweet spot. If you're a gym owner, typically as an owner of a business, you're not working in the business, you're working on the business, you're doing the business development. So it's got to be something you're familiar with, got to be something that you're passionate about, but you're not necessarily working in that business. And then when you talk about what the world needs, you got to understand what that market is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. What you can be paid for also has a lot to do with what the world needs, but also how you see yourself. I know some friends that are in the leadership consulting business. They were fantastic leaders in the military, but keep in mind, 93% of the population have no military experience. So while they value military leadership, they can't necessarily get paid for their leadership consulting as a retired colonel, because the rest of the world doesn't understand that. And then what you're good at, also keep in mind, you can be trained. And Scott, my chief operating officer, is retired sergeant major, and I like to say, our business is science, but it's not rocket science. And with franchising, one of the keys to franchising is the training that is available to franchisees and their teams. So let me talk a little bit about the basics, and this is from the perspective of a franchisor, but also so that a franchisee understands that. And in its essence, franchising is the right to use the brand, and with the brand comes intellectual property, trademarks, and things like that, in a specific geographical area for a specific purpose. Usually that specific geographical area is defined as a franchise territory. For us, it's a matter of zip codes, defined by zip codes. It often is by zip code. Sometimes it's counties, sometimes it's regions, sometimes it's multiple franchise territories, et cetera. But also you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So hypothetically, if you are the owner of VetCor of San Antonio, Texas, you start an LLC, you're the CEO of, let's say, Black Knight Ventures, which was what Mike Long's company was called, doing business as VetCor of San Antonio. So I, as the CEO of VetCor, the franchisor, can't tell you who to hire, who to fire. But if you need help, if you need, training agreements, if you need HR advice, if you need the training manuals, all those kinds of things, you can come to the franchisor for help. So it's an affiliation that I think is important, because you can always phone a friend, but you also have a lot of independence as an independent business owner. I tell people, I think the key to franchising is training, standardizing, and replicating. And as a result, who does training, standardizing, and replicating better than the U.S. military? And it's one of the strengths that I think veterans have as franchisors and franchisees. With a franchise comes relationships. It comes oftentimes with the relationships that help you generate revenue. So for us, as an example, we're a preferred vendor for over 60 insurance companies. You get turned on with VetCor, you get credentialed, et cetera. Now you have relationships and you get direct referrals from those. Same thing is very common with multiple franchise systems. You also get relationships with support and administration and logistics. So you start out in business as a transitioning veteran, you don't know where to get insurance, you don't know how to do marketing, all these types of things. Well, the franchisor often has those relationships built in, and they do a handoff to the franchisee. And then what most franchisors want you to do is develop your similar relationships locally. So as I talked about, working on the business, but not in the business, you become the brand ambassador in your specific territory. As I mentioned, the training, standardizing, and replicating, those are all recipes for success. You typically get an operations manual. You'll often get a local marketing playbook, perhaps a finance and accounting manual, all of these things that are tried and true. So you're not reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch. And then I tell folks, and close your eyes and imagine a network of retired senior military leaders. That's what we're shooting for with VetCor, who are used to always doing an after-action what happened, why it happened, and how you can improve. Because you're not competing with one another, right? Because you have your territory, they have their territories. So the stronger you all as a system make the brand, the better it is collectively for everyone. So sharing is good, and we have a really good tradition of doing that in the military. And then lastly, in order to understand a particular brand that you're interested in, the franchise disclosure document is key. And it's a standard document that must be filed by the franchisor federally. And there are 16 states that are called registration states that require some sort of registration, typically something additional to the FDD, but it's pretty standard. There are 2 states that publicly disclose the FDD. So if you're ever interested in finding some information or getting the FDD without going through the formal process, I'm happy to connect with you, or Mike or Gilbert or Josh probably have those websites. We can send them to you that allow you to get the publicly available FDD that's disclosed. It's not publicly available federally, but it is in 2 states, and they typically offer it to anyone. And most franchisors, because those states are franchise friendly, oftentimes are filed and ready to go in those states. So key to that, and I'm sure Gilbert and Josh have more about that as well. Some personal experience: the 2 greatest challenges of starting a business, and I'm talking about generically a business, and overcoming them, is 1, financing the business and the growth of the business. Because in the military, I didn't have to deal with cash flow challenges. And so you got to figure out what you need, ongoing royalty requirements. Do you have finance partners available? Most franchisors do, particularly if the franchisor is an SBA certified franchisor like we are. It makes it easier to get an SBA loan. And then growth, success. If you achieve success, it's actually easy to outrun your cash flow if you don't take that into consideration. And we've had those experiences, and so we're happy to share those. But typically not things that military leaders in particular have thought about, like the cash flow cycle of when you invoice and when you get paid for something. And then the other piece is getting the business. Oftentimes we're not really good marketers or salesmen, because we don't like to talk about ourselves. So what I tell people is we have a local marketing playbook that is kind of a script for people. But I tell our franchisors, don't focus on the transactions, focus on the relationships. And when you do that, have a good story to tell. I believe we do with our brand. And then just tell stories, and then transactions will follow from those relationships. And I tell people with the result of VetCor, don't look for handouts, but focus on our mission, because we're a veteran-owned, veteran-operated company, et cetera. And regardless of whatever your brand is, present the facts, which is really what's your unique selling position? What makes your brand unique in whatever they do? Whether they create widgets or have services, what makes your brand unique? And those are ways to help overcome, I think, some of those 2 challenges. One of the primary concerns that we find veterans have is there's a lot of risk and there's some unknown, and it's a big leap of faith, right? So really 2 ways, some ways to overcome the financial risk. We have funding partners, and most franchisors do, who can provide capital as long as you have a business plan. We help with that. Most franchisors do. Typically, franchisors cannot provide revenue projections until and unless a franchise agreement is signed, but they'll help guide you towards that. It's a franchise disclosure law, unless it's disclosed in item 19 of the FDD. There's ways to lease the equipment versus buy equipment to avoid the upfront costs to you. And if a franchisor is an approved franchisor by the SBA, it makes it easier to get an SBA loan. And I always tell people conservative planning up front, and will help you with your glide path. And then operational risk mitigation, training and operations managers follow the process. And if you're in the service academy, I tell people I got on the conveyor belt, and 4 years later I got off when I graduated. There was a ton of people helping me stay on the conveyor belt, unlike my son, who went to Florida State and had a lot of incentives to get off. A franchisor is very similar to a service academy. They have a system, follow the system, and there's a ton of people that are there to help. Expectations of a franchisor. We want you to be a brand ambassador. These are generic to any franchisor. You got to make money and be an independent small business owner. And as we talked about in the network, sharing good ideas shamelessly and sharing them willingly. Don't do anything to damage the brand, because the franchisor owns the brand. do be an entrepreneur, do be entrepreneurial minded, but you can't be an entrepreneur because it's not your brand. So you can't say, I think I'll go start a VetCor lawnmower repair shop. But you could say, hey, I have an idea in my territory, this might work, and you go to the franchisor. So we want franchisees to be entrepreneurial minded, but you can't be entrepreneurs. So there's some best practices, and I'm running short on my time, but I'll just cover these very briefly. I tell people consider it like a military operation. For every line in a pro forma, develop a fact or an assumption. If it's an assumption, you should fight for intel to develop those assumptions into facts. And then begin with the end in mind so that you're considering your cash flow and what that does to your operations so that you can manage just-in-time expenses because there's capital costs up front starting a business. Then you manage your cash flow through the process, communicate with your franchisor and their team, communicate to your left, right, up, down. And that's all I have. I'm going to hand it off to Gilbert and and Josh, who have some great information on other aspects of franchising. Happy to follow up with anybody as needed. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and, hey, Paul, can you let me share my screen? Okay, well, hey, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Gilbert Seguid. I am the founder and also the franchise broker for Veterans Franchise Group. So I am going to be sharing a lot about the different types of the franchises and a little bit about myself. You know, I was a surface warfare officer. Please excuse my glamour shot here. But after I got out of the military, you know, the only option that I really saw was either go to school or go get a job. And like, you know, Paul shared, I had a huge ego. Luckily, now that I'm 41, I was able to squash that ego, but I did have a huge ego and all I wanted was the money. So got into the tech industry, climbed a corporate ladder, but you know, there really was something missing. And what that missing was being able to live life on my own terms and to be able to achieve that financial freedom and time freedom. And I knew that that was not possible with having a job. And so I set myself on a path to business ownership and created a business on the side while I was still working full time until the point where my job was actually costing me revenue for my business. So I quit that job and went full time. And I stumbled into franchising because you know, I had a recruiting business and I was at a job fair and the booth next to me was a franchise broker. So he sold me on to, you know, starting a franchise, kind of diversify my portfolio and realized that I can actually make a bigger impact being a broker and being able to empower other military veterans to start businesses in franchising. So that's how I became a franchise broker. So, you know, the summary, what we're going to be talking about is the different types, you know, the life cycle of franchises, different examples in the industries, and then a big part is going to be the value proposition. And so those that, you know, graduated B school or have been in business ownership, value proposition is really looking at what the customer pain point is, right? Seeing what is going to want them to buy or, you know, pay for a service, but most importantly, why are they going to buy from you? And so that's really important when looking at buying a franchise, but also being a future franchisee. What is a franchisor providing you that helps fix your pain point? And if you guys want to reach out to me, I'll go ahead and put my contact info at the end of my presentation as well. All right, so these are really important questions that you got to ask yourself when you're getting into franchising of owning a business, right? And you know, there are going to be different opportunities to get these questions answered with every franchise that you look at, from either the franchisor or, most importantly, speaking to existing franchisees. But a big part about getting the questions answered and having those answers align with your goals is picking the right franchise. But the problem is there's over 1,000 different franchises, hundreds of different industries. And so it could be, you know, a pretty big challenge. But hopefully, you know, you'll have the right resources and also coaching to be able to help you answer these questions. So looking at the different franchise types, yeah, you know, we have different industries. Like, you know, you can have a painting company, you can have a restoration company, you can even own a Subway, right? You know, funny thing is, I wish I actually learned about franchising when I first got out of the Navy because, be a whole different world right now, right? But for me, but the only thing I really knew about franchising was a Subway, and that it cost over $400,000. And I didn't really know anything about business loans or anything. And that's why I picked a job, because I was like, okay, well, I don't have 400K to buy a business, so let's move on. But looking at different franchise types, you have an option, right? You can either have a brick and mortar store, or you can be home base, have a home base office, maybe have a storage unit, the whole nine. And what comes into play that you want to look at when you're looking at different franchises is, okay, what is your initial investment? Am I going to be spending a lot of money to lease up space, do leasehold improvements to make it look nice so that customers can come in? Well, that's going to add up when it comes to initial investment. Well, if you have a home-based business, or even just a small little office, then it's not going to be that big of an initial investment compared to a retail space. And then you also got to look at your ongoing cost. What are your costs of your lease? What are the costs of all the other things that come into play when running a business, along with your overhead? So a lot of that, the cost has to come into play when you're looking for the right franchise. And so, retail versus service, retail is where you're selling a product, and service is more of you're having your employees go over to the customer sites and doing a service work, such as cleaning, restoration, painting, those type of businesses. Big difference between B2B and B2C, business to business or business to consumer, is looking at who are your customers. There's a lot of pros with having a business to business, considering that, you're just building relationships, right? Such as, restoration, you're building relationships with, let's say, the insurance companies, so that you're the go-to person whenever there's some type of disaster or a flood or anything like that, they're going to call on you. Business to consumer is more of, hey, you have a store, you're selling maybe a sandwich, and you're selling to the consumer. Well, there's a lot of pros and cons there. One of the big cons lately is just, Yelp. Like, you have this angry customer, they're going to put a bad review, then all of a sudden your business is shot. So, it's all up to you though, like how you want to do business, who you're comfortable doing business with. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that there are different ways that you can own your business and operate it. Most franchises, they want the owner operator where you're going full time. You're not working another job. Maybe you're coming out of the military, or you're leaving a corporate job after the military, and you're just full-time business owner, putting your whole 100% heart into it. But there's also other opportunities for those who they don't have the ability to do that, whether it be financial responsibilities or whatever it is. Well, there's opportunities where you can actually start a semi-passive business. And what that means is you're committing less than 20 hours a week. But the thing about it is franchises are created so that they can support that. So it's important that when you talk to the franchises, that you're very clear on what your availability is and also your goals. I know a good amount of people that have created semi-passive businesses where they hired a manager, they did all the training, they're running the business, but they're coming in and checking the P&Ls and the goals and everything is in alignment. And then eventually they're able to quit their job and do this full time. So that is also a good option. The one thing to consider though is that it's going to be a bigger investment, because now you got to pay whatever it is, the $40,000 to $50,000 a year to pay for that manager. And you're going to be burning the midnight oil, running your business, and also working your job as well. When it comes to sales and operations, there's some franchises where they actually provide a lot of support when it comes to sales. There's some franchises where they have a full-on 115-person full-time staff at the franchisor level that will do all the marketing for you, that actually have a call center that will do all the appointments and actually book the appointments, so that your focus is really just operations, hiring the right people, making sure that your customers are happy, getting them dispatched, the whole nine, right? Well, there's a cost for that, but it all depends on what your focus is and what your strengths are in your business. And then, some of the franchises also can be these huge conglomerates, where they have this parent company, and then there's maybe 30 different sister brands that you have. Well, a lot of pros to that, right? Because now you have cross marketing that can be, available. You're using the full-time staff to help support your business, the whole nine. But also a lot of that is now you're looking at more of a corporate structure where there's a lot of politics that can come into play, and there's not a lot of leeway that you have when running your business. So there's those are more the overarching different types of franchises. And when it comes to franchising, there is also a life cycle. Just like Paul shared, somebody who created a franchise is somebody who had an idea, took that leap of faith and started the business, found success, hopefully along the way started their SOPs to document everything, and now selling it. Well, when they first start out, there's a lot of great pros to that, right? Because now there's just this wide open territory that's available. Some franchises will give you a whole city if you want. Some of them will just go by zip codes. It all depends on the business. So a lot of pros there because you can actually create an empire within your own territory with the support with the franchisor. And so as they grow, it's more entrepreneurial. You're giving feedback. It's going back and forth. And then once it starts reaching up to the 100 mark, there's a lot of pros and cons there. The cons, as you go up with the numbers of territories throughout the nation, it means that there's not going to be a lot of territories available for where you want to start. Like I have a franchisee that's looking to start in Austin, Texas. Well, everybody's there, or even Florida or different places. So it's really hard to actually find a territory, or if not, they may just have one zip code versus being able to have 10 zip codes. So a lot of pros and cons of the way that, the life cycle of a business. When you're looking at empires, these are like your Subways, your well-known brands. But it's all up to what your risk tolerance is and also what your goals are when starting a franchise. And here are some of the different examples. Who knew, right? Most people think that franchising are just restaurants and barbershops. Well, I know a lot of veterans that actually succeed and do really well when it comes to service-based businesses, because that's what we do in the military. We serve customers, right? What I like about that is you're dealing with a lower overhead, a lower investment. It's a lot of it's very operational focused too. And so I've seen a lot of success with people doing home improvement, restoration, the growing trends with the senior care, with the elderly getting older and older. There's a lot of great opportunities there. And it's not necessarily having like a elderly home business. Having a property where you have nurses providing elderly care. It's more of an agency where you provide maybe CNAs to go get dispatched to go to the different customers' homes to provide non-medical type of assistance, because a lot of elderly are just wanting to stay home instead of being in nursing homes. So a lot of really cool opportunities there. If you could think of a business and industry, they probably have a franchise there. Okay, so the value proposition, right? Why would customers want to go to you versus the competition? And when it comes to franchising, you'll notice that franchising will always beat out a private contractor. What they call it is the chuck in the truck. The guy that's in overalls, that is just not well kept, that's unprofessional. Well, hey, they're all over Yelp, and that's probably how you find your gardener, your landscaper, your painter, or whatever. They're everywhere, right? Well, the franchises know that, and the good ones have a really great marketing strategy that they know exactly who to market to, such as who are the people that have that pain point that they don't want to deal with these contractors. Well, they're the people that probably make 100K or more in household income, probably dual income families, so that they just don't have time. And that's the biggest pain point for a lot of these customers is they don't want to deal with calling 100 people and trying to get a quote. They just want efficient, professional service. And so franchises, they really do target that and provide a lot of great marketing support for that. For example, I know a good cleaning company where their target market is CHU, which is churches, hospitals, educational centers, and warehouses. And those are their prime customers, and they kill it. One of their customers that they have in Missouri is the largest Baptist church in the country. And so if you can imagine how, a huge church like that, how much recurring revenue that they can get from that one business. And then the value proposition for the franchisee. So if you're looking to be a franchise owner, you're going to be the franchisee, where Paul and VetCor is a franchisor. For the franchisee, you really got to identify your own self of your personal pain point, right? What are your strengths? What is your passions? What are the things that are important to you? And then figuring out of like how hard is it to achieve those goals, right? If that makes sense. So looking at your pain points. So let's say maybe you're more of a wallflower when it comes to marketing, and you're just not great at sales, right? You're not a good networker. So you want to find a franchise that maybe can help support you with that, whether that be training, or if it's just naturally not into you, finding a franchise that can actually support you with that, with whatever structure that they have in the franchise. So, some of the values that the franchises provide are, the great SOPs, training, not only just the initial training when you first start a franchise, but the ongoing training and training for your employees. You got to really figure out and see what type of training that they're going to provide you if you have no experience in that industry or in owning a business. Marketing support, sales support. Again, I shared with you some of the support that some of these franchises provide, and like national accounts, that's really great. If you can have contracts with different insurance agencies, different property managers, and you can just leverage those relationships for each territory, then it's just like, instant business right there. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is that there's a lot of great coaching available. I know some franchises where they give you a business coach and an operations coach. They'll help you create your goals. They'll look at your KPIs. They'll help you adjust so that you don't have to start your business not knowing what to do. And then the territory and scalability, there's a lot of factors that come into play with this, right? If you're that business owner that you just want to take over the world and create a 7-figure business, you really got to pay attention to see what's available in your territory. So let's say you're in a very busy territory and there's just no room to grow. And then there's not enough scalability when it comes to the it may not be in line with what you're looking for. So you might have to look for a different type of business. But there's some businesses out there where they're just, there's just an abundant amount of territory available and business that it just takes the right person to be able to grow that. So yeah, that's my presentation. If you guys want to reach out to me, I'll put my info in the chat and I'll go ahead and pass that on to Josh.
Cool, thanks, Gilbert. Alrighty. So Josh Emerson, I was a class of 2014 at the Naval Academy, Marine Corps officer for 5 years, and then got out, went to China for 6 months, learned how to speak Mandarin, learned some Kung Fu, and then I've been doing this for about 1.5 years, and I'm really enjoying it. So let's get started. What I'm talking about today is the process, right? So the process, what's going to look like of working with us and finding the right franchise is it starts with the education, right? About franchising in general, about how to do research, and about finding funding. That education starts today with this webinar, and it'll go on to I've got some courses, free video courses, an ebook. I'm sure Gilbert has lots of things that he can give you as well, and so that you have a real firm understanding of what's out there. Then we're going to get to know you with a franchise personality assessment and do an interview where we ask all sorts of questions, right? And we'll get into that a little bit in just a sec. Match you to some right fit franchises, introduce you to those franchises development representatives, people like Mike Long from VetCor. You'll receive webinars from the franchise representatives, speak to funding experts, determine your financial options. And today I'll talk about how much you should expect to spend and what the funding options kind of look like. You'll receive the franchise disclosure document that Paul referenced earlier. You'll speak to at least 5 owners. We call that validation because you're validating what you've heard so far. You'll do more calls with the CEO and other members of the corporate team. You'll attend a discovery day, which used to be all at the headquarters, right? Through the pandemic, some people have gone online. Now it's kind of 50-50 about which one you'll do. You'll be awarded a franchise agreement, and then you'll make a decision if you're going to sign it or not, right? So in this whole process, you're not making a decision. You're not committing into anything until you've made that, until you receive the franchise agreement, right? And that's going to be about 2 to 4 months from speaking with us. So this is thorough because it's a huge decision. So, we're not expecting you to make this overnight. All right, so starting from the beginning, the interview process. And I'm coming at you hot and heavy because I've got about 10 more minutes to go through this. And then you can ask questions about anything at the end. So the interview process, like we said, starts with that franchise personality assessment. And then during the interview, we're going to ask you lots of questions. What do you do for fun? What would you do if you had all the money in the world? What are your goals in business? How much time, money, and energy do you want to invest? What skills do you want to leverage in this business, right? And more. This is an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes longer, really digging in deep so that way we can match you to the right franchises. We are going to ask about financials, right? So it's not a lot of capital. It's not a big deal. We just need to know. Maybe you're a multimillionaire, but you only want to invest $25,000. Again, no problem. We just need to know so that way we can match you up to what you want to invest. And I'll ask you if you'll speak to 2 to 3 franchises. So Gilbert and I do a lot of research to match you up. So we just ask, the ones we present, just do a couple intro calls. And if you don't like what you heard, that's no problem. You can speak to new franchises. We'll do more research, or you can tell us to, never talk to me again, right? Whatever, that's fine. We just ask that you do those intro calls. And then any other decision maker should be here. Spouses obviously affects their lives significantly, so they should be part of the process because they need to like the franchise as well. Maybe you have a business partner or a silent investor. They all need to like the franchise that you want to start, and so they all should be part of the interview. Right after we do the interview, we'll do our research and we'll present you with some options. Usually 4 to 6 right fit franchises. We're gonna tell you why we think that franchise is a perfect fit for you. You're gonna do those 2 to 3 20-minute intro calls we were talking about, and then if you like them, we can start over. If you don't like them, we can start over. If you do like them, you're gonna go on to the webinars, right? So for that first intro call, it's just like an overview. You'll ask your questions. They'll get to know you a little bit. Let's say you want to keep learning about them, then you'll dive deeper in subsequent webinars. I'll give you, and Gilbert will give you tons of questions to ask on these calls. So that way you go in prepared. You're gonna do a lot of research on your own, looking up what other franchisees have to say, what customers are saying about the franchise, that sort of thing. You're gonna build out your pro forma. You're gonna investigate the competition. You're gonna start looking at real estate prices in your area. That's gonna be part of your pro forma. Reviews of the franchise by customers. And again, for all these calls, all decision makers should be on the call, right? So your spouse, business partner, investors, whoever. All right, and then we're going to talk about intro to funding experts. This is a really important step, even if you're just thinking about owning a franchise, because you want to know what your reach is, right? So it doesn't take too long to get a pre-approval letter, and it gives you the confidence that you can actually fund the franchise, and you're not wasting your time speaking to someone about something that's kind of out of your reach, right? No hard credit check, not a lot of paperwork. And they're there to just help you, right? So this is the intro and the pre-approval, all that's non-committal, totally free, just giving you an idea of what you can or can't do. And then there's some variables in the funding, right? So they're gonna ask you what's your liquidity, what's your credit score, what's your net worth, do you have other sources of income? What about your spouse? Does he or she have another source of income? What's your debt to income ratio, monthly expenses? What type of franchise are you getting, right? Some banks will look at you and say, I'll never loan you money for a restaurant. But if you come in here with a service franchise, then we'll loan you that. And for another bank, it might be the opposite, right? So the type of franchise is important. And of course, there's more. There's always more variables, situation dependent, right? As we all like to say. And then here's a quick definition of a word I'm about to use on the next slide, cash injection. That's your own money that you have to spend on the business before the bank will fund you. Can't be a personal loan, but it can be funded in a number of ways I'm about to mention, right? So just to give you an example, if the all-in project cost is $100,000 and the bank says you've got to put a cash injection of $15,000, or excuse me, of 15%, then you would be using $15,000 of your own money, and the bank would be funding the $85,000 once they see that you've personally put skin in the game, right? So top value. So just to reiterate the top values of a franchise: business plans, experts to support your business, or it's the franchisor, network of people that have done what you're doing, that's the franchisees, brand name, and so much more, right? But all that comes with a cost, right? So upfront is the franchise fee. It's usually what people use for their cash injection. That helps the franchise recoup training costs, onboarding, and the recruitment process. It's typically $35,000 to $60,000. You usually see it sitting around 45 to 50. And then ongoing, you're gonna have royalties. It's a percent of your revenue going back to the franchise in perpetuity. That supports the call centers. It supports the business coaches. It supports the marketing collateral. It supports all this stuff that the franchise is doing on your behalf. Advertising fees. So the first part of this is a mandatory percent that needs to be paid in your local market. This is actually good for you, right? Because it's there. You can't grow unless you advertise for growth. So it's just holding you true to that to ensure continual growth. And then a percent's going to go back to the franchisor to make big marketing plans and keep someone on staff to do collateral, right? So That way, everybody's paying a little bit so they can get a really professional person to do all their marketing, to potentially to make billboards or to make commercials, right? Things that a single business owner would never be able to do. And that's kind of why you can outcompete the mom and pop shops. Some franchises have amazing software, and there might be fees in terms of maintenance and architecture of that software, right? So all in costs, here we're getting to the good stuff, right? Typically I'll see 3 buckets, right? So you'll have a home-based business, it's under $150,000. You'll have something that's not home-based, or it's a really small build out, or maybe it is home-based, but there's a lot of equipment. You'll see that around 250 to 400,000. And then you'll see things that are large build outs, or, you know, maybe some franchises want you to come in with multiple territories, and you're looking at an all-in cost of over 400,000. So what goes in this all-in cost, right? Renting real estate, if it has a location, the franchise fee, advertising, training, build out for a storefront if needed, equipment, marketing, labor, bookkeeping, cost of goods if you're selling stuff, and working capital, which is just kind of all encompassing, you know, working capital. Okay. So that all that's going to go into getting you to that break-even point where the franchise is paying for itself. So ways you can fund the cash injection, or even the entire business if you want. There's this program called the rollover as business startups. It's money from a retirement account, where the retirement account invests in. So you start a business, you issue stocks, the retirement account buys those stocks. You're the CEO of that company, so you can do whatever you want with it, right? So you can use that to fund however you see fit within your business. Home equity lines of credit. If you don't want to cash out refi, you can take a line of credit against your home equity. You could cash out refi and use that. Whole life insurance, you can take a loan against the policy. Take a loan against your stock portfolio, up to 50% of the portfolio's value. It's becoming really kind of popular right now, as stocks are growing and people don't want to create a taxable event by liquidating that. They can take a loan against that portfolio and use it as the cash advance, right? And those are typically 2 to 3%, so very low interest loans. You can do the same thing if you have cryptocurrency holdings, as well as gifting from friends and family. Sometimes I call it friends, family, and fools, right? But hopefully not for you. And then any other way that you can think of, right? And that goes towards SBA loans. They can do personal loans up to $50,000, express loans up to $150,000 project cost. There's lower cash injection here, no collateral, although there is a personal guarantee. And you can't use this for a build out. And you do need post-closing liquidity, is just demonstrating that you won't be living on the streets after you have this cash injection, right? Whether it's a pile of cash that you're going to live off of, a retirement income, or your spouse has some sort of outside income. They just want to make sure that you're going to be able to sustain yourself until the business breaks even, right? And then you have the 7A loan, which is larger, over $150,000, goes up to $5 million. Larger cash injection, does require collateral. You do need, same thing, you're not going to be living on the streets after you do your cash injection. And then, so these are the 3 basic loans. There's other types of loans out there, and that's why we recommend you speak to funding professionals, right? So how do you do that? You can go out and find a local bank. A lot of work. It's hard to know what they like. Like I was saying before, some banks like certain concepts, others like other concepts, right? So if you work with an SBA broker or a lending professional, then they'll be able to match you up to those banks. So if you work with an independent SBA broker, you're still doing a lot of the work. They'll refer you to banks that like your specific type of business. Low fees, if any. They'll coach you through the process, but it's a little more hands-off than a professional or a lending professional, and then more willing to do the smaller loans. So these are those $50,000 personal loans are going to be from these independent brokers. However, you work with a major franchise funding broker. These are big companies. They have specialties like the ROBS program, the rollover program. Higher fees, which are usually they're usually a flat fee. So the bigger the loan, right, the smaller that fee looks. They'll do some of the work for you, because they typically have funded a ton of these franchises in the past, and they have some of that documentation they've used in the past. They typically won't do loans under $100,000. And so again, we have contacts with all across this full gamut of lenders that we can introduce you to. There's alternative funding strategies, whether it's a partnership. I'm actually speaking with someone right now who he is partnered with kind of like a silent investor, and she's paying for it in cash, and he's going to operate the business, and they're going to split the equity. Crowdfunding websites, there's other personal loans from a variety of sources. Community development financial institutions are institutions that serve serve borrowers who are typically under loan to, which includes veterans, minorities, women, and other sorts of demographics like that. And then, of course, just anything else you can come up with. This is business, so however you can structure it, if it works, it works. The franchise disclosure document, I'm coming up towards the end, so I'm going to go through this real quick. It's submitted to the Federal Trade Commission. There's a lot of items in there written for you. You'll see broken down costs. You'll see average earnings of franchisees that have been open for at least a year. You'll see an example contract, and you have to have this for 2 weeks before you can sign an agreement. So you're just going to confirm that you got it, right? That's a rule from the Federal Trade Commission. It's going to seem restrictive because McDonald's can't let people start serving sushi and not be able to do anything about it, right? And you make sure you write down questions as you read it. Validation, I think this is the most important part. It's where you speak to current franchise owners, and then you're going to speak to owners who come from, if you're outside the military now, whether you speak to veterans or people, you're a stockbroker, you talk to other stockbrokers, right? You want to talk to people in markets similar to you, people in your state, because they'll understand regulations better, and anyone that has your goal, right? So you can, if let's say you wanted to open 3 locations in 5 years, then work semi-passively, and your kids work in the business, you probably want to speak to someone who's already done this and hear how they did it. During this is business, so there's no such thing as a personal question, right? Validate your pro forma, ask them about their relationship with the franchisor, ask them if they feel supported, ask them if they could have done it on their own, ask them literally anything, right? Don't feel awkward. This is your chance to really dig in deep to those franchises. So again, write down your goals and validate them. Discovery Day, it's when you visit the headquarters, or sometimes virtually. At this point, you should understand the business. You're going to believe it's going to work for you in your area. At the Discovery Day, you're going to get to know the culture of that franchise. You get that feeling when you shake someone's hand, look them in the eye. And great franchisors, they don't sell franchises, they award them, right? So it's a two-way interview. When you get in there, they're making sure that you can properly represent their brand, and you're making sure that this is the person that you want to partner with for 10, 20, 30 years, right? Who knows how long you're going to be doing this. And then lastly, they're going to award you that agreement, right? That's the contract. So it'll be the terms of the agreement, your exact territory will be laid out, any non-compete clauses, any benchmarks that you have to hit to maintain your status as a franchisee, consequences if you don't maintain those benchmarks, or if you start serving sushi at McDonald's, right? What are the consequences about that? And I encourage you to have a franchise lawyer summarize it. Not just any lawyer. Most lawyers don't understand franchising. It's a completely different animal. So we can recommend you to some really reliable franchise lawyers. And lastly, you're gonna make a decision. So is this for you or not? It's the point. This is the only point where you have enough information to make a decision, right? So go through the process. Go to the Discovery Day. You'll finally be where you can mentally to be able to make that decision. All right. So you're gonna be nervous because no one's 100% sure. It's something new. It's something unknown, especially if you've never owned a business before. Okay, a good plan now is better than a perfect plan a year from now. So that's the whole process. We include some funding there. I'm going to drop my information in the chat as well as the link to the course that I've built for y'all, and we'll start taking questions.
Hi guys, jumping back on here because we're about that time, but I just want to make sure all attendees have time to get your guys' information. If you guys visit the chat room, just make sure that you jot down, Josh just dropped his info in there. I saw Gilbert and Paul, or Mike as well, who was monitoring in the background. So take a couple minutes to get that down, and we will go ahead and wrap this up. Again, this was recorded, so if you want to rewatch, because I know that was a lot of great information to take in and connect with our panelists today. And special thanks to Paul, Gilbert, and Josh, and Mike for being part of the SAC conference, as well as putting on this webinar today. So thank you all, and we're going to go ahead and close out. Again, please follow up with our panelists. They dropped in their communications into the chat room, and we will see you guys later.
Thanks.
Bye.